think we're started. So hi everyone, thanks for joining our brown bag discussion. For those of you who aren't familiar with CM2, it stands for Cooperative Mobility for Competitive Megaregions. We're a Tier 1 research center which aims to advance research, education, and technology transfer initiatives to improve the mobility of people, goods, in urban and rural communities of megaregions. So our brown bags are basically like our monthly event where researchers present their work and their findings in this informal discussion environment with other students and professors. The series is sort of like a way for students to hone their presentation skills, research points, and provide like a platform for feedback. So today, students in Professor Zhang's class, the Megaregional Planning class, are going to talk about our reports based on our trip to Germany and the Netherlands, which we went on earlier this semester. So the students spent a week with local professionals learning about transportation issues in those megaregions. So we're going to talk a little bit about the reports that we've developed based on that trip. So before we hear from the students, I was just going to let Professor Zhang say a few words.
Yes, thank you, Nadia. I just want to say thank you all for coming to this CM2 brown bag week. I see that we have 2 guests. Thank you, and we will like to hear what our brilliant students will tell us about they experienced in the Netherlands and Germany and what they're doing for this semester for the class project. Thank you all.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen with the PowerPoint then. So this is just a picture of our class. We got the opportunity to, I think there's a couple people missing in there just to be very clear about it, but a bunch of us rented bikes the last day that we were in Amsterdam and rode around the city, which was a really cool experience. So just wanted to include that for some background. And then I think it's Josiah.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Josiah Lindquist, and I prepared one slide for you guys today, so I'll just go ahead and talk through it a little bit. But my research examined the overlapping priorities for cities within the Texas Triangle, and I kind of used MPOs as my unit of analysis. So while we were in Germany and the Netherlands, I think what we saw was that a lot of these larger scale infrastructure projects were made possible because of this collective identity. And sometimes that was formal and sometimes it was informal. But for example, the Ruhr region was really able to develop this interconnected landscape park. They of course had a regional organizational body, but they also had this unified vision for the future. They kind of all had this collective identity. And I think when we start to relate that back to the Texas Triangle, we see that the Texas Triangle very much lacks any sort of mega regional identity. No one identifies as from the Texas Triangle, and there's not really any sort of collective organizational bodies. So very little collaboration on regional infrastructure project initiatives because of that. Yet all of the cities' economies and populations are going to continue to grow, and they're going to continue to feel the same pains. Additionally, of course, there's this agglomeration effect. So we know that investments in some of the cities, in the larger cities, are going to flow into the others. So given really that there's no regional organizational capacity to work with, to start this sort of collaboration, I decided to examine MPOs because the nature of their work really spans geographic borders, and there's already a level of regional cooperation. Of course, it is sparse. So what my research exactly did was it included content analysis of the MPOs regional and metropolitan transportation plans. And then I went in and ranked the concerns expressed by the citizens, stakeholders, planning officials, as well as the goals and the economic development adjacent priorities that they will use, this transportation investments that they're all lining up, all those things that they're going to benefit. So really, in lieu of developing an actual identity for the Texas Triangle from this spatial relationship that really has not all that much connections besides a highway system and economic activity, what I was looking for was overlapping priorities that may be room for a smaller scale cooperation that could build trust and lead into larger scale cooperation on the mega regional scale. So in the process of analyzing the data that I found, there certainly were overlaps on the concern of economic competitiveness, regional connectivity, both of which have potential springboards for future collaboration. Of course, I should note that each of these plans are guided by federal legislation that lays out the sort of goals that they already need to work on, and then performance indicators. But each MPO still defines their own goals, priorities, their challenges, and their concerns based off local or public input, as well as just local context. So really hoping that the research that I did can kind of lay a foundation and serve as like a state of the community of sorts that can make more transparent the commonalities between MPOs. So again, I decided not to analyze city to city specifics, rather the MPO, because they already work on border spanning projects. Of course, it's transportation, but they're also collaborating on various levels of governance with the DOT, with the cities in specific, the county level. So they're a logical unit to begin working on projects at the mega regional scale. And I'm excited to see after all my analysis is complete, where there really is room for cooperation. So that's all I have.
Thank you. So this next one's actually me. So during our trip to the Netherlands and Germany, we were able to visit 2 national bicycle highways. And the bicycle highway is basically a bike path that's meant for long distance travel. So it can go between multiple cities, jurisdictions. They're meant to create this alternative to the car and commuter traffic. So after learning about the bicycle highways from local practitioners, I decided to focus my report on creating one in the Texas Triangle megaregion, and sort of proposing the idea of where one could go and how it would look. So in order to do this, before I got it started on this, I took a closer look at the 2 case studies that we visited. The first one is in the Randstad region in the Netherlands. So the bicycle highway there runs from the capital in Arnhem all the way to the city of Nijmegen, which we visited. And I chose this one as one of the case studies because of the way that it follows a major roadway. It allows bikes to pass through without stopping for cars in most parts, and it has regulations of the proper roadway etiquette. And the path is made of this like smooth red asphalt in most parts, which allows for faster cycling. And so I took a look at the funding of this project and learned that it was funded mostly by the municipalities that it passes through and a little bit by the state that those cities are located in. The total cost for the project was about 16 million euros to build. And then I went on from there and looked at the planning of the project, the layout, design, all the things that went into planning that specific project. And the second case study is called the RS1 or the Velobahn, which is located in the Rhine-Ruhr region of Germany. So we also got to see a piece of this one. And this one is interesting because basically what Germany did following this period of deindustrialization, after experiencing all this like economic distress, they decided to design all these projects to sort of help uplift the economy. And one of the projects they proposed was this bicycle superhighway. And the highway connects about 10 different cities and goes about 62 miles total. And the funding for this project, 50% of it was funded by the EU, actually in this case, and the other portion all came from local and state governments. It was interesting that in both scenarios, none of the money came from the federal governments. And the entire project costs about 196 million euros. It's a lot bigger than the example in the Netherlands. That came to about 1.8 million euros per kilometer versus the 10 million euros per kilometer that it costs to build roads in Germany. So basically what I did is I considered these case studies and looked at all the different aspects, and from there tried to look at possible placements in Texas. So I mostly considered population density, population growth, and use. And after including all those factors, there's definitely several places where there'd be potential for a bicycle highway in the Texas Triangle like region, but I decided to kind of hone it down to the Austin-San Antonio corridor along 35. Basically, both these cities already have a lot of existing bicycle infrastructure, so any type of bicycle highway could just be connected to the existing infrastructure. And they both have bicycle master plans that are pretty well developed. There's also several towns between San Antonio and Austin that have pretty thriving populations, like San Marcos, which is primarily a college town and fairly dense for a smaller city, and then New Braunfels also. So basically, my research is going to continue to build off of these existing plans and create some connections between the cities, offering this alternative to car commuting. And of course, like, it's important to keep in mind, I'm not expecting that people will be commuting from Austin to San Antonio, but it's more like people who live outside of these big cities. And then one major thing that I thought was really important that they spoke about in the Germany case study, the Velobahn, was that each of these bicycle highways, yes, it's passing through 10 cities, but they made sure that there was connections to the city center. That way people are able to actually like take this and get into the city center where they might be working or going to school or whatever it might be. So that is where I'll continue from here. I'll be looking at a very specific route and sort of honing in on some of the details around the possibilities around this bicycle highway. Thank you. And I'll go to the next slide now.
Hi everyone, my name is Tatum and I will be talking about the viability of a public-private partnership for creating a system of transit-oriented parks in the Texas Triangle. So the reason that I'm looking into this is because on our trip to the Netherlands and Germany, one of the major projects that we visited was a large regional park system, and this system was integrated with transit, including the bike highway that Nadia was just discussing, as well as stops for buses and trams. And many parks that we came across in both Netherlands and Germany outside of this regional system were similarly situated around transit stops to increase the access to the parks and to provide something to do at the end of the stops. We also learned that many of these parks were funded in collaboration with private entities. So what I'm exploring is whether cities in the Texas Triangle are already using private funds to develop park systems, whether those park systems are oriented around transit, because cities in Texas have a reputation for using public-private partnerships to fund things like highways. So I'm curious how else we're using this money if we're already relying on it heavily. So the way I'm doing this is looking at the master plans for the park systems and the transportation systems in each of the major cities in the Texas Triangle. I'm looking for mentions of regional cooperation, integration of the goals between the transportation systems and the park systems, and how both of these systems are being funded. And at the end of this, my goal is to assess whether there could be a larger system of parks along a high-speed rail corridor if that were to happen in the Texas Triangle, because there's already a lot of discussion about where will the stops be for that high-speed rail, and will there be anything to do? Will they be actual connections to the cities they're stopping in? So far, I have looked at the plans in depth for the city of Austin. I found that both the park systems and the transportation systems rely heavily on private funds. And these systems both have goals that are aligned with each other. Both systems mention the other plans and talk about building transit-oriented parks. In particular, at the Metro rail stop off of MLK Boulevard in Austin, they are planning to acquire land to develop a larger park system. And this is connected to a major trail system that they're developing called the East Lake Trail, which connects other parks within the city of Austin. So this is something that the city of Austin is actively exploring on how to create a system of transit-oriented parks. For other cities, such as San Antonio, where their park system isn't as strong and their transportation system isn't as strong, they're still exploring how to use private money to do this sort of thing, but it's not as well integrated as the city of Austin. So my next step is to explore the other cities more in depth and learn whether this is a viable option at the mega regional scale.
Okay, my turn. Hello everyone, I'm Frank, and my topic of my final project is about from commutes to mega-regional development in Texas. And the topic is inspired by my observations of the intercity travel and commutes during the trip of the Netherlands in Germany. And so the MAC region could be known as a new scale of geography, has been experiencing significant discussions in the planning field. So it's interesting that some observers view the emergence of MAC regions as a phenomenon for granted, while others may emphasize on the importance and necessity of MAC regional planning. So by using the data I have acquired, the data from 1990 census-based county-to-county commuting flows, and another one is the 2011 to 2015 ACS-based county-to-county commuting flows, and conducting exhaustive analysis of the census multi-year inter-county commuting flows. My term project targets providing compelling evidence-based assessments and further recognition in terms of the economic geography of Texas. And the second is the trends of mega agglomeration in Texas. And the last but the most is the existence and development of Texas Triangle as a large-scale mega region. So I hope that the final result can inform the decisions of policymakers and urban planners who represent numerous initiatives from economic development to transportation planning in Texas, and also prepare them for both challenges and opportunities in mega-regional planning. So until now, my study has done some visual interpretation of commuting flow mapping for 1990 and the period of 2011 to 2015. And in my study also several aspects of the period of 2011 to 15 SS-based county level flows are chosen out and compared to their 1990 census-based counterparts to completely assess commuting patterns of change for inter-county commutes over the focused period. And also I have done some algorithmic computation for the identification of network partition in Texas. The last is to compare the visually presented spatial clusters and the statistical network partition. So in my study, I have got some initial findings and conclusions in terms of the flow mappings can visually present a remarkable spatial form of triangle. And the descriptive statistics of my data can disclose and prove the and unrelenting upward trend of mega agglomeration within the geography of Texas Triangle and the whole Texas. And also, the most interesting thing is the computational partitioning algorithm can statistically demonstrate the existence of Texas Triangle. So overall, this all I have done right now, and I'm very expect the final result, all the final result I can get for my term project. Thank you.
All right, so I'm looking at how to plan for high-speed rail in rural Texas. It's a big part of mega-regional planning is high-speed rail. And very fortunately here in Texas, the Texas Central Line is starting to gain a lot of traction. And I think that the proposed station in Grimes County, which is a very rural part of Texas, poses some really interesting issues. One of the things that really struck me on our trip was the amount of sort of mega regional and regional scale projects that were there, but were also really catered to local context. So when we were in Germany, we visited several locations along the Emscher Landscape Park, which is essentially this massive park system that spans across the larger sort of Rhine-Ruhr region. And it's a collection of former industrial sites that have sort of been linked together by bike paths and greenery. And so it's this massive regional scale park, but each aspect of it is catered to a local context and the local needs. And also when we were in the Netherlands, we visited several locations along what's called the Room for the River project, which was part of this big, massive deep holdering process to address sort of flood mitigation, flood concerns. And again, that was a project where they did some really impressive work with local communities to make sure that each community's needs were being met in their sort of part of the project. And so I think the Texas Central Line is a similar and interesting case here in Texas, in the Texas Triangle mega region, and trying to figure out how to fit high-speed rail into a local context, especially one that's rural, is going to be really interesting. So trying to figure out how do you plan sort of around more of a transportation basis for these sort of large-scale projects to make sure that they're meeting the needs of the communities. I think rural communities in specifically have a unique set of needs. So in doing so, I'll be pulling from a lot of the materials and have been pulling from a lot of the materials we collected and received while we were over in Germany and the Netherlands. And I'll also be looking at some case studies from the proposed California high-speed rail line, just because they have some interesting examples that specifically relate to high-speed rail in rural areas and how to better plan for stations that don't necessarily fit the traditional rail and high-speed rail contexts, as well as looking at the Nijmegen station, where we visited, as that's another station that sort of fits a more specific and local context than just being in sort of a major central city area, and trying to figure out, again, how do we do this? How do we meaningfully include these communities and address their needs? And it requires a lot of analysis of looking at, income demographics, economics, transportation systems that are already in existence, and how you can fit these projects and work with those communities. Yeah.
So I think this was Paul's. I don't know if Professor Zhang knows what he's working on or wants to speak a little bit about it.
Yeah, so we met yesterday, or the day before yesterday, the second time. What he was interested in is to apply the lessons learned from this large-scale landscape park case, Germany context to Texas context. That Ensure Landscape Park is a large-scale, decades effort, multi-jurisdictional park project, and we were very impressed by that project because it served not just as a landscape project, but they interpret it as a green space, a glue that connects, unites all the jurisdiction cities, somewhere like 50 to 70 local communities together, and really as a regional effort. The very impressive example they mentioned that when talking about economic development and other things, and then city boundary between cities on both sides of the boundaries, they kind of like compete with each other. And here with this regional park idea in place, city boundaries in most cases are rivers, river branches, and they start, cities start talking about, it's not the boundaries of the rivers, but through the riverfront improvement, we really ignore the boundaries, but focusing on how we act together. So this is idea. This idea is very interesting. And then Paul is trying to find the idea that whether or not and how can be applied to the Texas context that could help local municipalities, communities work together. So one specific article forwarded by Lisa Loftus-Ottaway, very interesting, talking about a Dallas-Fort Worth area. The title of that article is like this, like how a bunch of, not exactly a bunch, and how a set of strong local cities can work together to make a powerhouse region. So that kind of idea is very interesting. In Paul's case here, he was looking at a Buffalo Bio example. The other day we visited online together. I also recommended another example. Looks like he did not put it over here. I'm not sure what he will do it or not. Is it Lower Colorado River Authority's work that Lower Colorado River, right, flows through Texas, through Austin, involving many communities, how many, several dozens counties. So I thought that was probably a comparable example to the Imshore Landscape Park. That's my understanding, and how far he has gone, I'm not sure. So, Nadia, back to you.
So, hello guys, good afternoon. My name is Erasmo. My sort of final term presentation is basically the intersection between land use and transportation. And so I just want to use this time or platform to introduce my final term project and show my methodology. So basically, the objective of my research topic is to provide at a mega regional scale transportation and land use policy recommendation around station areas in the Texas Triangle, specifically for central stations within the 4 metro regions in Texas that make up the Texas Triangle. That'll be like the Austin Metro, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metro, Houston, and then San Antonio. And so the goal is to really guide urban development within the Texas Triangle in a way that it sort of resembles that TOD patterns. And so I will begin my research by firstly assessing the current transport and land use systems at the 4 central stations in Texas. And I'll be doing this by applying the node place model that you can see on the left. And if you guys don't know what it is, I can quickly explain. As you can see, it's fairly easy. It's composed of 2 components, basically the place value and then also node value. And so these values are basically determined by indicators. So the place value are normally indicators that have to do with place, what they call place. And it's mostly land use diversity, population or employment density, walkability, while the node values are normally determined by more transit-oriented indicators, such as accessibility to stations, transfer frequency, variety of transfer, etc. And so these indicators are normally found using GIS data, census data, statistical analysis. And so once these indicators are found, you can easily plot them, and then you're able to measure their growth potential. And you can see sort of how they're plotted on the graph over to the bottom right. This is an example of one mainly made in the Randstad region. And so with these, you can see that most of them are in this balance section, but you can see some that are skewed over more to the node section. And these node, you can see that it signifies that they're very robust, which means as a policymaker that you can begin to set priorities in investment or in development that you would now need to, in order to match that robustness in transportation, you would need to do that in the place section. And so for the Texas Triangle, using this model, however, is kind of weak because first of all, Texas doesn't really have a mega regional transportation system. And so a way that I sort of thought of comparing these a little bit better is to include a typology made of the Randstad region, so including the four metro areas in the Randstad mega region, the Hague, Utrecht, Rotterdam, and Amsterdam. And then with these, create a case study to provide a little bit more context at a mega regional scale and be able to measure them a little bit. So, yeah.
Okay, so this is Jenny. Nadia, I cannot share my screen, so I will just talk on the slides.
Okay, you don't want me to just exit it and you share?
I cannot share because I'm disabled. Because you are the host, only the host can share the screen.
Oh, did you want me to just pull up your whole slideshow or?
Oh, yeah. That would,
okay.
Because I don't have time to compare it to one slide.
Okay.
My research is
Okay, I'm about to share it.
So my slides is on the topic of this upgrading rail network, improve transportation equity in mega region. It's a case study of Randstad and Rhine Ruhr. So I started this research from an academic perspective by looking into what is transportation equity. So I provide some of the background about what is equity, the fairness of which impact are distributed, and what is the environmental justice, how it's defined under the US context, and under the topic of environmental justice, what is transportation equity, which is like part of the environmental justice. It's a fair and proper distribution and accessibility of transportation facilities to all people regardless of race, ethics, and socioeconomic status. In the next page, I provide some literature reviews under the, can you go to the next slide? I provide some of the literature reviews about the theoretical background of the equity. And it starts from the utilitarianism, the libertarianism, the intuitionism, to the egalitarianism. And the next part, I did research on the equity analysis, both at the aggregate level and the individual level. And in the next slides, I look into because for my own research, I would focus on the aggregate level to measure the transportation equity. So I look into the framework about this analysis from the step 1, defining the EG communities, to step 2, calculate the transit accessibility, and to step 3, evaluate the EG communities. And so defining the EG community is a key part of the transportation equity analysis, and there are multiple methods to do that, like the threshold method, the community-based identification. And can you click it? There's an animation. Yeah, so from my research, how my research differs from built on the previous research is that previous research on transportation equity focused at the metropolitan level, and their geographic unit is based on community, while my research is would focus on mega-region level connected by the rail transportation network. So the scale actually larger both at the study boundary and the geographic unit. So I'll use the county level data as the geographic unit to study the mega-region level transportation equity. And can go to the next slide. For the, so here's my research question: how upgrade rail network in Europe based on Trans-Europe transportation network plan affects transportation equity into mega regions in Europe, the Randstad and the Ruhr, which is the places we visited during the charrette, and how the result has a significance for Texas Triangle with the ongoing Dallas-Houston high-speed rail plans. Next slide. So the data methods here, I include the boundaries and geographic units of the 2 mega regions, the Randstad and Ruhr. For Randstad, there are 4 major metropolitans, 12 small cities, and 417 LAU is the local administrative unit in the European context. And I use it as my geographic unit to do analysis. And next slide is the Rhine-Ruhr region boundary. It includes 2 major metropolitans, the Ruhrgebiet and the Köln-Bonn, and the other small cities. And so there's one thing is that the geographic unit in Germany, as far as what I could find, is much more detailed than the Randstad's case. So this is also like one scale problem I'm going to deal with in future. And the last slide is my expected results. The results will show how defined EG communities perform regarding transportation accessibility within existing real work. And the context-based discussion will touch on how to improve transportation equity with regional transport policies from a mega-region perspective and provide insights for mega-regional transportation planning in Texas Triangle. That's all.
Okay, so I think that was the last student presentation. I don't know if anyone that joined or any of the other students want to ask each other questions. Professor Zhang, feel free to chime in too if there's something you were thinking.
Do you have the slide from Elizabeth?
I took it out when you emailed me to modify the presentation accordingly, but I didn't know other people weren't coming. So
Sorry. No, I thought Michelle cannot make it. No, that's fine. I thought Elizabeth already emailed you her slides. So. And another person, Elizabeth is learning from the planning framework called Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, SUMP, developed by this private consulting firm in Germany, the Rapid Consulting. And we visited Germany, their office in Germany, and then luckily, we met one of our former graduates from CRP in the PhD program. And SUMP, the basic idea is, I call it the plan of plans, a plan that serves as a linkage of all different plans in a community so that different offices, agencies, and departments can work together towards an overall commonly agreed set of sustainable development goals. The very interesting concept. The person I ran into the consulting firm's director at the TRB meeting, and then scheduled a meeting with his staff when our students traveled to Germany. So Elizabeth is working on introducing in detail that practice, and then sees how that idea can translate into the US context, or in particular the Texas context. Michelle is also working on something related to EJ, environmental justice, and works closely with Lisa Loftus-Ottaway. Sorry, due to some kind of urgencies, they could not join us today. I do see we have two guests here, Dr. Cindy Rosenblum, and then another one with a username Wathel. I do not recognize that person. And then Dr. Walton, Mike Walton was here earlier listening to you folks and just left. So I'd like to open it up to our guests or other people if you would like to join us, whether asking questions or offering us your suggestions. Okay. So this technology is not, technology is wonderful only when it works. So what about each other? Do you have questions, comments about each other? No? Josiah, if not, then let me ask you then. Oh, you're not turning on your speaker.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so I thought we agreed that you work on the local communities rather than MPO. So the MPO analysis of the indicators, I really have a hard time understanding its connection with the core interests of yours in terms of regional identity.
Yeah, I looked into analyzing the city, at the city level, trying to use some content analysis software, but I couldn't figure that out. And so as you see, I changed the topic of my paper just slightly to more align with it, going more on the aligning priorities rather than an identity. So that way I could still use the research I did.
Okay, and wow, we have a special guest, Dean Steiner. Can you hear us, Dean Steiner?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi.
Hey, wow,
I thought I would stop by the meeting for, well, I'm on Zoom anyway for a while.
Great. Well, we just had our students in the class share their experience traveling to the Netherlands in Germany with Ellen and Ellen's group,
Yeah,
and then talking about their ongoing work for the term projects.
great. I'm sorry I missed it. I was on another call.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you join us here. As you know, our class, our group differs from Allen's in the sense that this is a planning student, CRP students.
Hmm.
They each work on a specific topic of their own interest. Some, I encourage them, some relate the term project with their PR. Others integrate the project with their ongoing research for specific projects, their own professors, others. So maybe we still have time. Folks, can you just share your idea, one sentence with Dr. Steiner? He's behind this joint studio effort last year, the current year, and in the future as well. All the CM2 project. Maybe one sentence. What are you working on? Nadia, you want to start?
Sure. Did you want me to re-pull up the slideshow just so that we can flash the slide while we're explaining it?
Okay.
Sure.
Cool. 1 second. So then Josiah, you'll be first. Nope. Sorry. Okay, I don't know why it's not working. Sorry. 1 second.
Or maybe just
Yeah,
say out loud one sentence. Nadia, you're working on bike superhighway.
Yeah, so I basically am doing my project on a bicycle superhighway in the Texas Triangle megaregion. So while we were on our trip, we were able to visit 2 national bicycle highways, one that connects 2 cities in the Netherlands, Arnhem and Nijmegen, so the capital, and then like the university town slash the city of about 170,000 people. And then another bicycle highway that I'm taking a look at as a case study is in Germany, in the Rhine-Ruhr region. It connects 10 different cities over 62 miles. And basically, I'm taking these 2 case studies to look at their planning, their funding, how they're organized, their designs, and from there, I'm sort of looking at the possibility of having one in the Texas Triangle region and getting as specific as picking a place and sort of talking about what a potential route would be, and then sort of the collaboration between cities and how they'll be connected through this bicycle path, and how feasible it would be, where the funding would come from, these sorts of things.
Yeah. Do you want me to say something, Ming?
Yes, please. Actually, I have a question for you on this. Well, please go ahead.
Well, I was going to just point out that probably the students don't know that I used to live in the Netherlands. So I know I used to live very close to Nijmegen. So
Okay.
I'm very familiar with that area because I used to live there. And I'm wondering if there are any, I also helped build a bicycle and a walking path in the Pacific Northwest, and we used an abandoned rail corridor. And I don't know if there's any. I would be surprised if there weren't some abandoned rail corridors in the Texas Triangle. I know there's the Katy Trail in Dallas that's been very successfully converted into a bike path. But it may be, if you're trying to target one, if there's any abandoned rail lines, because they can be repurposed through Rails for Trails for bike. It's a good idea, by the way. Just saying.
Cool. Yeah, that's actually one section that Professor Zhang recommended I include in my report is exploring the possibility of you doing the trail by rail. So looking at potential routes along abandoned railroad right of way.
Yeah, the one that I was involved in was between Pullman, Washington, and Moscow, Idaho. It's only 12 miles, but it's been very successful.
I'll write that down. Cool.
Yeah. So you can get pictures of it, and people on their bikes and.
Yeah, the great Nijmegen, the bike highway outside Nijmegen, it was really nice. I took like a 6-mile ride over there with a rental bike. And the question I was going to ask you, Fritz, Nadia and I was exploring the possible candidate routes for bike highway in Texas. And this corridor between Austin and San Antonio, along this Edward Aquifer, I recall that Bob Yarrow and you did a landscape studio a few years back. I wonder if that could become a possible candidate site.
Yeah, because Bob and I, well, it was mainly Bob, and it was a planning studio.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
And Bob mainly was looking because at the time there was the what was it, the big the rail initiative between San Antonio and Austin, and of course that since doesn't look like it's moving ahead. But there were 2 rail lines, as I recall, between San Antonio and Austin. One still being used for freight, and the other one I think has been abandoned, as I recall. But Bob was looking. The students were looking at that one. That's a very good report, by the way, that group did. I think Alan.
Sorry.
I think Alan Shearer has it in the Center for Sustainable Development. I think there's a copy there, or Bob has. I have it. So in normal times, I could just send it to you right now, but I don't know where it's at on my out there in my. But it's a good report.
Yeah, it's okay. We can ask Alan Shearer.
One of the city planning students was named Brittany, I think, or Britton. Does that ring a bell? She was really good.
Okay. So any other one who wants to share your idea with Fritz? And Fritz is so resourceful and knows the Texas region over here so well, and plus lots of the examples possibly coming out of the northeastern corridor that we can learn from. Anyone else, please? Hayden, you want to talk about a P3 model?
Sure. So I am looking into the prospect of creating transit-oriented parks using public-private partnerships, because on our trip to the Netherlands and Germany, we visited a lot of parks and they were all very well integrated with the bike highway that Nadia was talking about, as well as just their public transportation in general. And so thinking about our transportation systems here in Texas, which maybe aren't so strong, as well as the possibility of high-speed rail and discussions about where those stops will be. I am just looking into how we are using private money in Texas and whether that is going into our park systems or our transportation systems. And I'm doing that by looking at the parks master plans and transportation master plans in all of the major cities of the Texas Triangle. And so far I've found that most of them are actually quite reliant on public-private partnerships, especially the park systems, and some of them have expressed a strong interest in creating these types of transit-oriented parks. So I am just assessing that right now.
That sounds interesting. Yeah, I don't. The other angle may be there was going to be a fair amount of land also set aside for in the area of floodplain buybacks as well as watershed, and there may be an additional source of funds outside of parks for in the whole water management arena too, that could have the additional benefit of if of open space that could be leveraged as well, I would think. I think each of the cities also, they don't do a very good job of coordinating between the different city agencies, but there may be a relationship between the parks folks and the water folks in the various cities, and the water plans and the parks and open space plan.
I agree. That is something that I should definitely look into, and something I've noticed looking at our parks plans is that a lot of them defer to watershed protection and other agencies. So I'll definitely be looking into that further.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I know in Austin particularly, and also San Antonio, the voters have been very supportive of setting aside with the bond issues to raise funds for watershed protection.
Yes.
And then Kate is looking at the design thinking for rural setting high-speed rail station. Yeah, this line between Dallas and Houston, and there's a station in the middle, the Grimes County station. So any examples, or maybe Kate, if you don't mind, say a few words about what you're working on, and then possibly some examples, ideas from Northeastern Corridor that Dean Steiner could recommend.
Yeah, so I'm kind of looking at the design aspect of stations, but sort of from a community engagement perspective. I think one of the things that was really impressive to me on our trip was sort of how the mega regional and regional projects we saw, like the Emscher Landscape Park and the Room for the River project in the Netherlands, how despite being these massive regional projects, they did a fairly impressive job of catering them to local contexts and making sure that local needs and goals were being met through those projects. And so trying to figure out how the design of a high-speed rail station in rural Texas can also meet those rural needs. I think it's sort of an interesting juxtaposition. So I've been sort of looking at the engagement processes behind the landscape park and the Room for the River project, but also looking at trying to understand a little bit more about how some of the stations we visited, specifically the Nijmegen station, sort of fit into the local context, just because the Nijmegen station, I mean, it is a central station, but Nijmegen's a much smaller city than Amsterdam or Rotterdam. And so I think that provides some interesting context. And I've also been looking at some of the plans for the Gilroy station in California on the California high-speed rail line. There's been some interesting plans there, and I found some interesting literature that I think was used to inform some of that plan, which critiqued a lot of California's design guidelines for the high-speed rail stations, basically for the reasons of the guidelines not necessarily being catered to specific local contexts and what planners and urban designers can do to make these designs work better for the communities that they serve.
Yeah, how big a station do you think it would be?
I'm not sure. I think it kind of depends. So I actually was in Dr. Zhang's practicum course last semester, where we sort of looked at the station areas and tried to come up with some plans. And the Grimes County Station presented a lot of opportunity, but also challenge because there's almost nothing out where it's proposed right now. So I think size-wise, I can't see it being huge just because it is kind of in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town is like College Station, Bryan, which isn't a massive community. But, you know, the question then sort of is like with this high-speed rail there, is that going to grow the community or not? Size-wise, I don't really know. It's still very up in the air because the line is still somewhat preliminarily being planned.
So is the reason why it's out in the middle of nowhere is because A&M is there?
Yeah, I think so. My understanding is they needed a midway stopping point between Dallas and Houston, and Grimes County made sense for a number of reasons, mostly because that's where there's a lot of accessible utility corridors. And so they've been able to get some easements on the utility corridor to build a line. And I think they've had some success with getting property owners out there to buy into it. But I think the main reason is College Station is sort of their nearest stopping point that would be sort of a populated area between Dallas and Houston.
Yeah, because it kind of runs contrary to having a high speed to have a stop, especially a stop in the middle of nowhere.
Exactly. Yeah, that's definitely something we ran into.
Well, I suppose the opportunity there would be, and you probably have looked into this, the possibility for a transit-oriented development.
Exactly.
And then that sort of begs the question of, how far away is it from College Station?
I believe it's about an hour driving. So it's
Oh boy,
like 50 miles or so. It's not especially close to College Station.
oh boy, that is.
Well, yeah. Yeah. So it presents some interesting challenges, and yeah, the closest example that I've been able to find, at least in the context of the plan, is for a proposed station in Gilroy, California, but even that is in a much more populated and denser area. But you know, that is sort of the challenge. They have proposed to put this station in Grimes County, and they have, you know, location identified for where they want to put it. So trying to figure out how you make that fit into their local community and context is going to be the challenge for sure.
Where they want it, is there anything? I mean, I know there's something there, but what's there?
There is a gas station, a Dollar Tree, and a mini storage facility.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing would be, I guess you don't want people to get off the train to sightsee, because that also, but it would be, if they have to stop, it would be interesting to think about what people are looking at the stop. I mean, what do they, you know, you're sitting there, I guess you have to make the stop for some technical reason. What, if the station would handle people either getting off or getting on, but maybe it's looking at what the experience is for the person on the train, what they will experience. And right now it sounds like, if I'm sitting on the train looking out at the dollar store, it's like, well, I can cross this off my list of wanting to come back here, unless I have to on the train again. But if there's something there that you know, makes it interesting for the person on the train, then it becomes more memorable for them.
For sure.
So maybe it's the station itself is architecturally significant, or maybe it's if the station wants to be small, it's more something about the landscape that's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I from my understanding here, the different high-speed alternative routes between Dallas and Houston, and initially one will go through College Station to serve the student, the faculty population, and the residents over there. But that will have kind of not as straight line as what the Texas Central right now is having. So they do propose to have a shuttle between College Station and the proposed station side, anticipating the future student population growth at Texas A&M. And then there's another university to the east of I-45. And what was the university again?
Sam
I think
Houston.
it's,
Yes, the Sam Houston. So they anticipate possible student population growth and being part of the forecast ridership.
So, you know, near on I-35 near Sam Houston, there's the biggest possible statue of Sam Houston you can imagine. So maybe it's something like that. Maybe maybe you have another giant Texan. People would remember it.
For sure.
You know, it's there's not enough heroic statues of women or people of color. So maybe it could be, you know, a humongous Barbara Jordan.
That's a good idea.
And people would look out and there's Barbara. Or Lady Bird Johnson throwing wildflower seeds. I mean, it's a very Texas sort of thing. I mean, I remember,
no, it definitely is. Yeah.
I remember Sam Houston from, you know, along I-35.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Well, we are, I guess, Nadia, the moderator, we are about to run out of time. How is Alan's studio going?
It's going really good. I mean, they were, you know, everybody, Ellen, I was talking to the other day, and she said that they were so happy that they were able to go on a trip with you guys because they came back and they were just, all of them were really energized. And then, you know, the disappointment now of everything closing down. So she said that energy has driven them through the rest of the semester. And they came back with, you know, they're working up in the Lehigh Valley, which is pretty similar to the Ruhr Valley in Germany. And they're just bursting with ideas and enthusiasm. So she said it was going really well. It'd be fun to sort of have something at the end of the semester to bring the two back together again.
Yeah, if that's possible, we can. Well, right now, Zoom mode communication probably makes it more feasible than just a physical travel. And we were very impressed by initially with just kind of a landscape project, but so insightful for us.
By the way, you know, I was speaking earlier today with one of our contacts up at Hartford, and they were very happy with the studio last year that we did between Hartford and Providence, Rhode Island.
Yeah.